Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Bernard. I am a Dating Matters coordinator and coach with the Archdiocese of Chicago Domestic Violence Outreach, also known as ACDVO, also a prevention educator here on that team. I am also a licensed clinical social worker. And today, what I wanted to do is be able to take everybody through our Dating Matters program that's going to be implemented at your school. I'm going to try to answer as many of the questions that we know that our parents and communities will have around the Dating Matters programming that your students will be offered. And if there are additional questions after the presentation, I'll remind you again at the end, but it is encouraged that you reach directly out to your school and the implementers who will be doing this program, or whoever sent out the initial link for this video. They will be more than able to answer questions for you. And if there is more that you need, you're welcome to connect with our ACDVO team. We'd be happy to help as well. So what's going to kind of happen is that we're going to talk about what is this program of Dating Matters. I'm going to go through an overview about the lessons that the students would be receiving. I am going to primarily focus on the sixth graders, but I will be able to explain also if your school is implementing for 7th or 8th grade, or eventually will be implementing for 7th and 8th grade, how the lessons year to year vary, but content-wise, subject matter-wise, the premises are pretty much all the same, which you'll be able to notice. And then any other logistical questions that you might be having around this program happening at your school, and when is it taking place, and things like that. So what is Dating Matters? It's an evidence-based, validated teen dating violence prevention curriculum model for youth ages 11 to 14. What's very unique about Dating Matters is that it has been developed for implementation in 6th and 7th grade. There's lots of really awesome programming that has been out over the last decade or so for violence prevention, but we see it mostly targeted at our high schools or college level, which is definitely needed and appropriate. Sometimes there's things that come into being for 8th graders, but what the research continues to show us is that violence is happening younger than college, younger than high school, younger than 8th grade. And it is age appropriate to have certain conversations with our 6th and 7th graders around these very same topics that the older kids have. It's just a change of language or examples that we may be using. Because when we're talking about violence prevention, is that we want to keep our youth safe and healthy. We want them to be able to notice warning signs for themselves or friends if they are being harmed by classmates or peers or people in their community on their own age level. And then, of course, if adults or other caregivers were causing them harm as well. And then on the flip side, in addition to wanting youth to be able to identify if victimization is happening to them, we overall want to reduce violence perpetration, right? So a lot of the skills that the students will be able to learn through the program as well is not just to reduce victimization of somebody being a victim, it's also to reduce people causing the harm, right? So the Dating Matters curriculum is comprehensive and includes prevention strategies for individuals like the students at the school, families, and the communities. And our ACDVO team is primarily focused on the individual programming at this point. There is some updates and strategies coming out that will be for schools who have already went through the program for a few years. There's other adaptations to this program that they can do. And then also there is parent program models that are being revised and made more accessible for parents to be able to view virtually online. So when that content becomes available, we're happy to provide that to our communities. And the other part about Dating Matters, it's multi-sessions, multi-grade components to promote healthy relationship skills and reduce behaviors that increase teen dating violence. And I'll be able to explain what it means to have multi-sessions here in a few minutes. Dating Matters was first developed between 2009 and 2011. It was called the Demonstration Project, and it was evaluated over 46 middle schools in Baltimore, Chicago, Oakland, and Fort Lauderdale. So they tested it, they piloted it, and pulled all that research together, and it was finally released to the public in 2019. So since it's been released to the public, our ACDVO team has grabbed that, and we've all been trained on it, and took the steps to be able to push this out to schools like yours in our community here in the Chicagoland area, And, our goal is to reach it to as many schools in Illinois and then hopefully across the United States as possible. But we are focused on our public and private schools in the Chicagoland area right now. The findings that have come out from the initial research from the CDC, this is a CDC program. The findings is that Dating Matters programming reported lower levels of teen dating violence perpetration and victimization, exactly what I said we were trying to target, and lower levels of negative conflict resolution strategies for students that were in the Dating Matters pilot versus students in other schools who did not get to receive Dating Matters. So when they did do this study, they had schools that had other curriculums or whatever school already had in place for their middle schoolers, and that could potentially have been nothing at all. And then we had schools who were doing the Dating Matters program itself. And so they were able to notice significant findings of lower levels of that perpetration and victimization. So there's lots of different types of victimizations that were being looked at and targeted as well, not just teen dating violence, bullying, so other peer-to-peer conflicts, cyberbullying or internet type abuse, physical violence, and sexual harassment. And then, of course, then on the victimization side, students reported lower levels of these things happening to them. And then what also was really cool about the program is that they noticed that other risk factors or risky behaviors that sometimes youth may engage in, such as other negative conflict behaviors, carrying a weapon, delinquency, alcohol and substance use, also saw a decrease for students who were able to participate in the Dating Matters program over not the Dating Matters program. So, and we recognize that I should have also mentioned the program is called Dating Matters. By the time this video comes out, or potentially in a few months, you may notice that there is a name change. The CDC is working on rebranding Dating Matters, because you might have already been thinking when you logged on to watch this video, like, I don't think my sixth grader is dating, or Jess, my sixth grader is not allowed to date. They cannot date till they're 30 and they're married and blah. Like, I totally get it. And that's why they're choosing to find a new name for the program, because although there is necessary that we talk about teen dating violence for our youth, we understand really the premise of so many of the different lessons that the students go through and the examples that they're given are not really primarily focused on dating relationships. Most of the conversations that the students are going to be having in their classroom are around platonic relationships, so peer-to-peer, them and their friend group, them and just other kids in their school. We also try to expand their thinking into like, hey, how could this conflict resolution be helpful for them and their sibling? There are some examples here and there that do come in to, give the idea that this could be something that is also useful if and when they ever choose to have a dating partner. And that could be, the official ways that a lot of us know around them going out on dates and stuff like that when they're a little bit older, but also how much of that translates to them talking to their crushes and things online. And we also know that students who are interested in dating or in a dating relationship or talking to their crush, when feelings get involved, things get a little bit more complicated for them to be making sometimes healthy and safe choices for themselves, or there's other levels of peer pressure and self-esteem that kind of come in when we're dealing with like, oh, that person really likes me and I don't want to make them upset and that kind of yada yada stuff. So, it's a nice balance. We don't overly talk about dating relationships in sixth grade. You get a little bit more in seventh grade. And some of you may already know that our eighth graders will be somewhat inclined to be interested in dating, or at least thinking about it. Or it may not be them. I tell students that you may be forever alone with your 20 cats, and that's totally fine. But how could this information be helpful for you if you had a friend who was getting hurt, or their cousin, or a family member, right? Because violence can happen to anyone, from anyone, no matter our socioeconomic status, what kind of school we go to, across all races and genders. So it's important that everybody's able to receive this information, to be at the same playing field, to know what's not appropriate or okay to have happen to them. How do they get help, and how do they develop other skills to just be a healthier communicator with people in their life. So I kind of already mentioned that there's a couple different components to Dating Matters. Like I said, we're going to focus on the youth program. The eye-to-eye youth communication program is something that kind of comes in after a school has done multiple years of Dating Matters, because then we have students who are older and been through the program that can kind of mentor younger students. So that's not something we're going to focus on today. And as I have already mentioned, the parent program, they had one, but it was in-person lessons, and we know that you guys are very, very busy as parents. So the CDC is working on making more like on-demand video type lessons more accessible for parents. So when that becomes available, we'll make sure that your school and community pushes that out too. In addition to those like core components, we also want to recognize that there's a lot of people that are a part of making Dating Matters happen, right? So as I mentioned, I'm a Dating Matters coordinator. So that means that I'm somebody who helps with training our implementers and onboarding new staff that are at your school to learning the program. All staff who are going to be implementing Dating Matters at any of our schools goes through a total of 7 hours of like asynchronous on your own learning, and in coupled with 10 hours, 3 hours of asynchronous online learning, and then you do a 7-hour live training with myself and a couple other Dating Matters coaches. So coaches are ACDVO staff who will be with your school and your implementers through the entirety of your programming for the year and then subsequent years to come. So we really check in with your school, make sure that your students are doing well with the content, and we help problem solve anything that might be coming up and really help your implementers feel secure and confident in what they're presenting to the youth, and just make sure we can troubleshoot anything so that everybody has a really successful and good time having this program in their school. And then our prevention leads, right now that's John Monaco. He is our prevention lead and chief operating officer for ACDVO. We also have Father Chuck Dunn, who is our founder for ACDVO, that is a part of our Dating Matters team at the Archdiocese of Chicago Domestic Violence Outreach. And then we have folks like you, parents and guardians who have their youth at this school that's receiving Dating Matters, and any of you who have chosen to watch this video today. You guys are a really important factor to be able to learn what your students are going to be like learning and exposed to at the school. And sometimes these are topics that parents have a really difficult time going through and explaining. It feels kind of cringy or yucky, right? Of course, the youth are like, oh my gosh, mom, dad, no, please don't talk to me about that. And sometimes as parents, we can feel a little uncomfortable having to bridge some of these conversations around relationships or dating or even violence. Us as adults have a history and a past, and there's a chance that things have happened to us, which can make it challenging to sometimes bridge these conversations with youth, or you're not sure, is this appropriate? Are they old enough to hear this? That kind of stuff. So we hope that having Dating Matters in your school is a stepping stone for y'all to take this back home and have conversations and open and honest conversations with the youth in your life, so that we can help them build protective factors, have more adults that they feel safe and open to talk to in case they or somebody else ever needed help. And then the youth themselves, this program is not going to run if we don't have kids in the classroom to see the programming. And then our social and mental health clinicians that are at our school. Some of the implementers at our school are teachers who are doing it during one of the core classes. And some of our schools will be having their clinical team, psychs or social workers, school counselors doing the programming. But even if those psychs or social workers, clinical staff are not the direct implementers, they're also super important folks that need to be aware, of course, as principals and admins are as well, about the program happening. Because if there are disclosures, somebody is triggered or needs any support, or if a kid asks a question or shares something in class that the implementer feels needs additional follow-up afterwards, we want to be able to get them connected to the appropriate staff at school that are clinically trained to be able to handle that, and then make those next steps to connect with like parents or outside resources to get that friend some support if there was a higher need, right? And so I think this is a really like nice little video. It's just going to be a couple minutes of giving an example of what youth, just giving us, take it down a notch, right? What could our sixth graders be dealing with that's going to look unhealthy, kind of sketchy, a little unsafe? Sketchy might not be the best word, right? But something that doesn't have to be all the way full-blown violence where a lot of us go that looks like somebody physically putting their hands on you or something like really, really, really bad has just happened. So I think a lot of us can picture or know, and our youth understand, like what is an extreme, right? But part of the importance around these lessons and having these conversations is we need to be able to identify it before it gets to the really bad stuff, before it gets super extreme, right? So I just want to kind of reorient us to reminding us of what some of our 6th or 7th graders might be looking like, talking like, and experiencing if they were having some issues with maybe a date partner, okay?
That Jason, what was his deal today?
He's mad Kevin borrowed my nose for science.
Seriously? Why does he care? And what's the deal with him always telling you what to wear and making you text him all the time?
I don't know. He gets jealous, I guess. I think you're sweet.
Well, are you gonna answer him?
He wants to come over. My mom doesn't like guys coming over when she's not home. What should I say?
No, we have to study.
But he gets really mad. How about we just talk outside for a few minutes?
Girl, your phone is blowing up. Tell him to chill out. What are you doing anyway?
Show him some of my new clothes. Hi, are you okay? I'm sorry.
Seriously? You're apologizing to him? He needs to leave you alone.
Jason, I told you he was just borrowing my nose. I swear I don't like him. I have to study. Can I call you later? No, my mom will be mad if you come over. I'll test you some of my new outfits. They're super cute. Okay, I promise. I will. No, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. Please don't be mad at me. Okay, you too.
Are you okay? Is he coming over?
I can't even focus right now. I'm totally gonna fail this test.
So it's a quick little snapshot just to remind us of, we are talking about some of our, like, well, many of you be like, my baby, like they're too young, right? Those young ones just in 6th grade. And, especially if it's the beginning of the school year for you right now, just thinking of like these ones, they're just 5th graders, not too long ago. Yes. And, we recognize that it is not super common that 6th graders are necessarily dating or being in relationships, depending on our school and our populations and things like that. But there are youth that by the time we're middle schoolers, I think most of us can think back and remember, we start kind of having some crushes or looking at people a little bit differently. And we might think people are cute, right? Like that's kind of the basics that we're at. And I always joke with my middle schoolers is they don't really have access to be able to go out and like date in the way that a lot of us would have if we're in high school or college, right? But just like in this example, there's a lot of phone and online communication, and sometimes they're able to hang out, or maybe they're staying after school and watching, their crush or their partner play maybe like their basketball game after school, or maybe there's a school dance or something like that, right? But you could kind of see, like, even though nothing big happened in that example, but there was some, it could feel like there was some guilt tripping. She's apologizing for what we don't even know because she's trying to study, and he's upset that she's not answering the phone. He's blowing her up a lot, trying to get her to pay attention and focus on him. He was considering sending some outfit pictures to him, which is not the worst case, but we know that that could get a little bit more risque or sketchy sometimes, depending on what people's requests for photos are. And then ultimately, at the end, that the poor girl was not able to focus studying on her test, right? And it does, that's one of the things that we'll notice and see is the mental health impact of not just having an unhealthy relationship or a violent relationship happen, but really the toll on that young person or adults, anybody's mental health, right? I can't focus on that test. Now I'm just worried about my partner, or they keep, distracting me and they're blowing up my phone. So now I'm losing time on studying, and then my grade doesn't do good. Now my parents upset with me because my grade's not good, and yada, 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 right? So there's a lot of things that obviously spiral, and more domino effects can happen from an unhealthy or an abusive relationship occurring in somebody's life. In addition to not just that type of dysfunction, but somebody developing anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. Sometimes people, depending on how difficult the depression or anxiety is for folks, then we're getting into concerns for risks of suicidality and self-harm and so forth. So what are we going to do about it, right? So prevention is key. Let's get this information in front of them before they're dating, before they're in the midst of the relationship, so they can recognize warning signs and get out sooner. They can have that autonomy and empowerment to be like, I don't want to be treated that way. I don't deserve to be treated that way. And I'm not going to stick around to find out if you're going to change. I'm out of here, right? I deserve better, which I think so many of us as adults just hope that the kid has, or think that like, oh, that's easy. Like, of course you should think that. But once your feelings get involved, or depending on how manipulative or coercive or what kind of power struggle is really happening in that dynamic, that stuff can go right out the window really, really quick. Okay. So the lessons progress that we do 6th grade. The 6th graders go the first year, then we do 6th and 7th grade the following year. So the folks who did 6th grade will then do a 7th grade lesson in their 7th grade year. And then in the 3rd year, the 6th graders who did 7th grade, who are now 8th graders, will do the 8th grade curriculum. Now you will notice that 6th and 7th grade's curriculum is called Dating Matters. And then the 8th grade curriculum is called Safe Dates. There was a publisher who already made a super great curriculum for 8th graders way before the CDC developed lessons for 6th and 7th grade. So the cool thing is that, the CDC came in with it in mind that they wanted to be able to fill that gap for 6th and 7th grade, and then use the 8th grade curriculum from Safe Dates that was already there. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel for that. So the premise, the type of content that students will be getting, examples, the social emotional learning things that will be in 6th and 7th grade also show up in 8th grade. 8th grade is way more forward on dating relationships than the 6th and 7th grade is. But again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, it's very, very typical that people see 8th graders getting, a dating violence presentation or conversation at some point in their academic year as 8th graders. So it is much more in their face as 8th graders than it is for 6th and 7th grade when we're talking about dating. So what you guys are all probably on here to know is, what are they actually going to hear or learn about in their lessons, okay? So there are 7 lessons for the 6th graders, there are 7 lessons for the 7th graders, and then there are 10 lessons for the 8th graders. These lessons are implemented once a week. So theoretically, if everything goes according to plan, the program should take 7 consecutive weeks to get through for our 6th graders and our 7th graders, and then 10 consecutive weeks to get through for the 8th graders, okay? And each lesson is around 50 minutes, so around whatever amount of time that your middle school has for an average class period, okay? And in that first lesson, we are starting out by orienting the students to what is Dating Matters, what is the purpose of this program, kind of what I'm doing for y'all today. And we go over some group expectations, classroom, like group agreements, right? Around, we should not be sharing stories or situations that have other people's names in it. If people ask particular questions, kind of what's shared in the room stays in the room, so that we can minimize gossip and things like that. But just some of the average classroom expectations around like, hey, this is a serious topic. We need you to pay attention and be quiet, but also like you're allowed to ask questions, and you don't want to sit here and try to make everything awkward. So we're going to try to, have fun with what can be sometimes a tough conversation. And after we go over group expectations, we talk about a safe adult at home and at school and in the community that your youth can reach out to if they or somebody else ever needed help. Super important that we establish this early, because as we progress through the lessons and we're talking about conflict resolution, or in lesson 5, when we're getting a little bit more specific on the different types of abuses that could happen to somebody, we want them from lesson 1 to know and remember and have identified people that they can go to get help from if they needed it, okay? And we really stress that they need to go to an adult to get help. Many of them want to go to their friends or maybe an older cousin or sibling, which I'll let them put on their, list, but I also want them to recognize, like, hey, you might really, really like your sibling, but sometimes your sibling is a pain and they're annoying and they say, get out of my room, I don't want to talk to you. And if it's a really big problem and your sibling doesn't want to listen to you that day, that's, we need to be able to go to somebody else who can listen to us. And I also let them know, like, somebody else who's around your age isn't going to be able to provide you the same type of help or interventions that an adult could, right? So really just trying to have them think, although it can be scary or feeling worrisome to have to go or awkward to go and talk to an adult, the adults are who can help make things happen if obviously if there's unhealthy or abusive things occurring and making that stop. And then the first activity the students get to really participate on their own and then as a group discussion is healthy relationship ingredients. So there's a lot of collaborative classroom, and then like the students all have like a little workbook that they also can work through different activities with, and helping them recognize different qualities of what do you want in a friendship? What are some qualities about a person that you want to have as a friend? And also, what are you bringing to the table? What kind of qualities do you have that makes you be a good friend? And then in addition to talking about friendships for a while, we do kind of switch over to, do we think our healthy relationship recipe changes at all if we are with a dating partner? And realistically, what we're saying is no, right? The qualities that we have of a friend is somebody that we also want and expect out of a dating partner as well. They just get a different label because we're dating them, right? Lesson 2, we start to get into feeling identification. As a clinician, I know every week I'm talking about feelings with adults, with college age students, with any aged person in my office. So being able to identify and normalize the feelings and the multiple types of feelings that we might be having is so, so important. And giving them that language early is super important and helpful. One, not for just the conflict management that might be coming in further lessons, but just so they can be in touch with themselves and their body to be like, what am I feeling? I'm not just feeling meh. I'm not just like okay or blah. Like, how can I describe that, right? And we also want to talk about that all feelings have meaning, right? There's body cues and sensations that could be going on that are letting us know something about ourselves that we might need to get support with or calm down or check in with somebody. And one of the fun games that students, or the fun activities that students like to do here is the charades activity, because the premise of feelings is that you don't really know what somebody is feeling unless you ask, right? So there's some charade activity that they do to have somebody come up and act out a certain type of feeling or emotion, and have there be some discussion in the class of, well, I think they're surprised, or, oh, I think they're worried, or I think they're shocked. Like, okay, yeah. And all of those could be true. But also, if I just walk by somebody and I see them have a face on them and I think that she's mad at me because she's looking like that, but she's really not, because she's just in deep contemplation and trying to figure out if she's going to pass her math test. Now I think that Jess is upset with me, even though it had nothing to do with that, right? So making sure we're working towards increasing communication and talking with somebody instead of just assuming what they might be feeling. That's what's happening in lesson 2. Lesson 3, after we've been able to identify what the heck are the feelings that I'm having, now we have to figure out how to stay in control of them, especially the ones that are around anger and frustration, but also sadness. There are no bad feelings. All feelings are valid and okay, but we are in charge of what we do with our behaviors that could result from those feelings. So they go through 4 different ways to stay in control of their feelings. These are a lot of coping skills, right? So they get to practice deep breathing. They practice how to change like negative thoughts into positive thoughts to increase positive self-talk. We talk about the importance of like physical activity that could help us get up and move and release some of the energy if it is something that needs to happen to help us calm down or stay in control of our feelings. And then, of course, reinforcing that talking to somebody, don't keep things to yourself, go talk it out with somebody. And this may be an example of when we say, hey, yeah, it's okay to go reach out to a friend and tell them that you've had a bad day, right? There are things that, of course, our youth can talk to other youth about. It's the more intense violence subject matter, or of course, if somebody's having mental health distress, self-harm, suicidality, things like that, that should also be brought to the attention of an adult. Lesson 4, we move into talking about communication and how do we practice listening to what somebody else has to say, and then also responding back appropriately. And we talk about that there's ways that we communicate verbally, like I'm doing now, and non-verbally. You know, that kind of jumps into back to lesson 2 around charades, right? Somebody could be like looking at you with squinty eyes, right? But they're also like having a voice like, wow, Jess, like, that's so cool. How are you today? And my facial expression and the sound that's coming out of my mouth don't match, right? Or I might be like, wow, that's such a good idea. Like, cool, Jess. But I'm rolling my eyes and I'm shaking my head, or I'm not even looking at you. Well, now I'm giving a different vibe on how I'm communicating back, right? So having students really pay attention to their verbal and nonverbal messaging that they might be sending off to somebody else, and also what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that. And ultimately practicing I statements. How do I communicate the feeling that I'm having, especially when I am sad, frustrated, annoyed, disappointed with something that happened, right? So more conflict resolution is coming out of here. I'm going to use an I statement to go approach somebody about something that's bothered me, but I'm not trying to attack them. I'm not trying to start drama. I'm not trying to create a problem. I'm trying to say, hey, I felt sad, you know, or maybe it's, I felt annoyed when you, hogged the bathroom this morning. I really need to get ready in the morning as well. And I felt stressed that I was running late, right? Instead of me being like, hey, sister, what the heck? Like, get out, blah, 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 right? And screaming and yelling. And then the parents are like, oh my God, what is happening upstairs? It's 7:30 in the morning. Please stop, right? So we can find better ways to communicate with our siblings, with our friends, the drama, the conflict, the intensity can lower. So there's a lot of role play that happens in that lesson. Then we get to lesson 5. Lesson 5 is what I call our meat and potatoes around violence prevention, because it is going to be pretty direct around different types of abuse, okay? And it is labeled as violence that can happen in a dating relationship, but realistically, as I've mentioned at the beginning, violence can happen to anyone from anyone. So I encourage our implementers to also shift it and shake it out a little bit, to just recognize that there are different ways that somebody could hurt you, right? So there are some statistics and implications of violence that are talked about, just like what is the prevalence, how often is this happening to young people, and the different types of abuse that they go over is physical violence, sexual violence, verbal, mental, emotional abuse, and then cyber abuse, stalking, things like that. And I know that can sound scary or worrisome for parents to hear that some of those topics may be discussed, but it can happen. You know, as a prevention educator who taught in anywhere from preschool to high school and college, I have seen all aged folks come forward and share that some sort of violence like this has happened to them. And it is scary and sad how young people have been when some of these forms of violence has happened to them, and not by the dating partner, right? By a family member or another peer, or somebody else that was a trusted person to them. So it is not overly descriptive or graphic. It is just a awareness of these are the ways that this violence can look. And if this is happening, we need to be able to get you help. Who are those safe adults you're going to? You are not in trouble. It is not your fault that this violence has happened, right? And what I also find to get a read of the classroom, and what I tell our implementers to do, is you ask the class to share, like, what are the different types of abuses that you know about? What are ways that somebody can hurt somebody else? And you'd be very surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised, but some people as adults are surprised at what the students come up with, and they'll hit every category. The sexual violence one is sometimes the one that people are a little bit more reluctant to talk about. So they think, oh, that's yucky or gross and that's not appropriate and you can't say it. And I would, yes, it is not appropriate to just talk about or make fun of, but it is important that we address it and know that it is a possibility that that could happen, because there's so much shame around that type of abuse in addition to the other ones. But sexual violence is really, really underreported, or people don't share for quite a bit of time after the incident has passed. So it's important that we're bringing that up. And most of the time, the language that's used in 6th or 7th grade is like inappropriate touches or touches on parts of your body that shouldn't be touched, things like that. So I like to joke with the 6th graders that I know they don't like to use the S word, so we'll change it and talk about an inappropriate touch or something like that. And there are scenarios that go through a red light, yellow light, green light. So just like a stoplight. And we talk about, they'll give you a little blurb, a little scenario, and the students get to mark, is it green light? Is it okay? No problemo. Is it kind of sketchy or sus, as they say, and it's a yellow light, or absolutely it's a red light? That's bad. They have to get help. They have to report that to an adult, right? Because yellow should still also include reporting or talking to somebody, but yellow is more, hey, you could probably use your conflict resolution skills from one of the other lessons to potentially fix something with that person in yellow, right? But yellow is also a warning. So like, as the youth like to say online, it's a red flag, right? But like, that's where you need to be making a decision of, do I need to get out of this or do something else to get help? Can I confront this person and talk about it to see if we can resolve it, right? But if something is red means we got to get out, we have to get help. Lesson 6 is the start of the students being able to make a project and reflect on, like a creative project and reflect on what they've learned over the last 5 lessons. We go over an acronym that is called Respect Me, and these are like our dating rights or rights that we should have or be able to think about having in any type of relationship. And then we go over school and community resources that, just to remind them if they or somebody else ever needed help. And then they start a creative project either individually, as a group. This is definitely up to the implementer to decide how they want to do this. So there's a variety of ways. We've had people do skits and poetry, a lot of awareness posters, which I'm a fan of just because you can hang them up in the classroom, put them in the hallway so that message stays up way past the time that we've already been doing programming, okay? And then lesson 7 is that they get to complete and finish up their project and then present it or share it with the class if they feel that they want to be able to do that. And a lot of our, the 6th graders are hams. They love to get up in front of the class. When you get to 7th and 8th graders, they're less likely to participate. But by lesson 7, it's a wrap up. And then if anything, any of the content that the implementer didn't get through and anything got pushed over, most often dating matters gets completed in 7 weeks, okay? So any other facts that I haven't mentioned yet is there are pre and post surveys that are created by the CDC around the program and curriculum that your school can choose to utilize for information for themselves. We can have those statistics so that parents in the community can also see how Dating Matters is working for your students. The surveys are anonymous. They are optional. Students don't have to take them, and the school does not have to do the surveys if they don't want to. If the pre and post surveys are not completed, we do ask that a satisfaction survey is given with just a couple questions at the end just to get the kids' opinion on how they felt that the lessons went. Families can opt out students. So if after, even though you've listened to this presentation today, if you feel like this is not something that you want your student to be able to participate in, no sweat, no worries. I appreciate you listening and coming and making that informed choice for yourself. There's no penalty or consequence for your kiddo to sit out. They will just either, the school will decide if they go to like the office or they go sit in the hallway, do studying, whatever. And there is, they're removed quickly or they just know where to go. So nobody else is going to know that that kid wasn't in class. We always have some schools that have a student or two that are opted out, and that's totally fine. It is not required and it is not going to hurt their grade if they're not in that course. As I said, there's 1 lesson a week for about 50 minutes. 7 consecutive lessons. So this is all less than 1% of class time that's taken up. There's no cost to the school. The Dating Matters program is free from the CDC. Any of the training and support that we provide to your implementers and your school is at no cost to your school. And if there's any resources that your school needs to be able to have this program up and running. ACDVO is able to cover the cost for that. And then Dating Matters fits academic standards and state mandates or requirements, depending if you're in a public or private school. I know that those could be different. But Dating Matters can fit into health, science, religion, and social emotional learning requirements for subject matter. So we know that it can be, there is lots of flexibility in where a school would like to put Dating Matters into that student's day. And then creative liberty for each facilitator in school, because your school is going to be different than any of the other schools that we're coaching and implementing it as well. Your student body, your parent community, how many classes you have, how many implementers you have, what are the issues and stuff that are going on in your school and your community. So there's a lot of flexibility that Dating Matters brings. So it doesn't have to be so rigid that we don't want our implementers to be reading out of a book and just going line by line. We need it to be immersive and experiential for what your students and your community may experience or be going through. So that's super important. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to the main facilitators or implementers who have provided you this link. So whether it's an admin at your school, your clinical staff at your school, or maybe the teacher themselves who is planning on having this in their classroom during, for whatever subject they're teaching. If there's more information that you need about the Archdiocese of Chicago Domestic Violence Outreach, you can just Google ACDVO or Archdiocese of Chicago Domestic Violence Outreach. You'll be able to see all of the work that we've been doing. There's a whole page on prevention. You'll be able to see Father Chuck Dom's homilies and different efforts that he's been making in a variety of parishes and communities around domestic violence. But we do public and private work, private sector work all of the time. So it's not just our faith-based communities that we are working with. So if you guys need anything, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you for joining, and I hope you have a great day.